It was Father's Day when a delivery arrived, a gift box from my daughter. Meant to be a surprise, it sat untouched on the counter until my wife glanced at it and leaned in, whispering, "Don't open it." I asked her why, confused, and leaned closer. My heart sank. I froze. 10 minutes later, the police were at our door. You won't believe what was in that box. But before we get into it, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Dad, do you even understand that I need the money now, not when you're gone? The coffee cup slipped from Samantha's hand and shattered on the hardwood. Brown liquid spread quickly over the Persian rug. Her face turned red as she stared down at the mess, her manicured fingers still shaking. In my hands, I clutched the inheritance documents, the ones I'd spent 30 years refining. Years of effort, now turned against me like a weapon by my own daughter. The paper crinkled under the pressure of my grip. "Samantha," I said, voice steady, "I'm not a cash machine. You'll receive your inheritance when the time comes." Peter, her husband, sank deeper into the leather couch, a smug grin playing on his face. "Come on, Will. She's your only daughter. What's a few thousand to help us out?" "A few thousand?" The man had no pride. Last month it was gambling. The month before, shopping. Their requests never stopped, they only grew more shameless. "Help you out," I said, rising to my feet, my 66-year-old knees groaning. "I've been helping you for 3 years straight. My retirement fund isn't your family's bailout plan." Jessica stepped into the room, twisting a dish towel in her hands. "Please," she said gently. "Let's just all calm down. We can talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" Samantha snapped, turning on her mother. "He's sitting on hundreds of thousands while we're drowning." "Debt you created," I replied, quietly but firmly. "Debt from your own choices." I noticed the family portrait on the mantel had fallen face down. Had it been knocked over in Samantha's outburst, or had someone turned it deliberately? The silver frame caught the light, gleaming like a mirror that reflected only emptiness. Peter leaned forward, placing his elbows on his knees. "Let's be honest, old man," he said darkly. "You like watching us struggle. It makes you feel powerful." Old man. The disrespect clung to me like a stench. This from someone who'd never held a real job, who lived off Samantha's credit cards and my reluctant generosity. "I worked 43 years for that money," I said, every word landing like a hammer. 12-hour days, missed birthdays, canceled holidays, so you could have a decent life, Samantha. So your mother and I could retire without fear. "Dignity?" she scoffed. "What's dignified about hoarding wealth while your family suffers?" "Suffers," I repeated, eyeing her designer bag, her polished nails, her new highlights. Peter's sneakers probably cost more than our monthly groceries. "Your suffering," I said flatly, "is self-inflicted." The room fell silent, tense like a drawn bow. Jessica moved forward slowly. "William," she said softly. "Should what?" Samantha snapped. "Keep letting you control everything with your money? Keep pretending you're some noble father while we struggle? Greedy, selfish, unloving." Each word slammed into me harder than the last. 43 years of sacrifice dismissed like garbage. Peter stood. His expression turned cold. "You enjoy this, don't you? Watching us beg. You get off on it." "Get out," I said, my voice rising from somewhere deep in my chest. "Both of you. Out of my house. Your house." Samantha shot back, eyes gleaming with fury. "The house Mom helped pay for? The house where I grew up? You don't get to throw out your own daughter. Watch me." But she didn't budge. Neither did Peter. They stood like predators sensing weakness, expecting me to cave, to write another check, to offer one more lifeline. Not this time. I walked to the front door, opened it wide. Cool air drifted in, laced with the scent of honeysuckle and the sound of nearby laughter, neighbors enjoying peaceful moments. When was the last time we'd laughed together? "Samantha," I said, still facing the open door, "take your husband and go. Don't come back until you're ready to talk like adult. About your finances. About solutions that don't involve raiding my savings. You'll regret this, she hissed, snatching her purse. One day you'll be sick and alone, and you'll wish you hadn't chosen money over family. Her heels pounded across the floor like gunshot. Peter paused at the door, glaring. This isn't over, old man, he muttered. Family doesn't abandon family. The door slammed behind them, shaking the windows. The silence that followed was louder than their shouting. I stood there, hand on the brass handle, unmoving. Through the frosted glass, I watched Samantha's BMW peel out of the driveway, tires squealing. Jessica's soft steps approached behind me. William. I turned slowly. The living room looked wrecked. Coffee soaked the rug we'd bought for our 20th anniversary. The inheritance papers lay like fallen leaves. The photo frame winked mockingly in the lamplight. 43 years, I whispered. What? Jessica asked gently. 43 years of overtime. Of missing dinner. So she could have new clothes. Textbook. A car at 16. That wedding we couldn't afford but paid for anyway. Jessica knelt to gather the papers, her motions slow and sad. She's struggling, William. She's addicted to gambling, I said, unable to soften it. Every debt, every lie, every bet, her choice. I walked to the mantel and lifted the fallen photo. 5-year-old Samantha smiled at me from the past, riding on my shoulders at the county fair. When had that sweet child become this angry, entitled stranger? Remember that dollhouse she wanted one Christmas? I asked. The one from the overpriced boutique? I'd worked 2 months of double shifts just to afford it. Jessica nodded, eyes glistening. The ballet classes, the name-brand shoes, the summer camps, every sacrifice made without question. And now, coffee mugs thrown, threats made, because I wouldn't give up the last of my life savings. She didn't throw it at you, Jessica said gently. She threw it at the floor. The difference felt meaningless. The disrespect was the same, whether it struck me or the things I'd worked for. I picked up one of the papers. I knew every line by memory. Every clause. Years of investing wisely, denying myself luxuries, building a safety net. Not just for us, but for Samantha. Peter put these ideas in her head, Jessica said. He twists her thinking. No, I replied. He didn't plant the greed. He just gave it permission to bloom. The truth sat heavy between us. We'd raised her to expect rescue. And we never said no, until now. My phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number, but I recognized the tone. Hope you're happy, Dad. The kids need coats and school stuff, but I guess your precious money matters more. Don't expect to see your grandkids anytime soon. The final blow. Grandchildren, her sharpest weapon. Emma and Jake, 8 and 6, caught in the middle of a war they didn't even know was happening. I held the phone out to Jessica. She read it in silence. No words left. Just a quiet, exhausted ache. Her face folded into worry. She wouldn't really keep them from us, would she? But we both knew the answer. Samantha had done it before, during lesser conflict. A week here, 2 weeks there. Every time we refused to give in immediately to her monetary demands, she'd use the children as leverage, turning them into tools in her never-ending campaign for cash. William, maybe we should. No. The word cracked through the room like a rifle shot. No more. I refuse to be blackmailed over my grandchildren. I will not teach Emma and Jake that love is transactional, that family is a negotiation. Jessica recoiled slightly at my intensity. In nearly 4 decades of marriage, she'd seldom seen me this furious. Even during our hardest moments, I'd never spoken with such harsh finality. But something inside me had broken tonight, something quiet and long-held. A realization about Samantha, about the fantasy I had for our future as a family. The illusion of loving sacrifice had shattered, just like that coffee mug. My phone buzzed again. 6 days passed. I was sitting on our front porch with the Sunday paper, trying to pretend this Father's Day was normal. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I held it anyway, more for comfort than anything else. Across the street, neighbors emerged to enjoy the morning sun. The Hendersons were packing their SUV, probably heading to some lake or family picnic. The Patels were tending to their garden, their soft laughter rising through the stillness of our cul-de-sac. Inside, I could hear Jessica moving about in the kitchen. The gentle clink of dishes and pans floated through the open window. We'd spent the last week skirting around the void Samantha had left behind, talking cautiously, hesitantly, as if speaking her name too loudly would summon another storm. Not a word from her. No calls. No texts. No drop-ins. No sudden pleas or dramatic apologies. It wasn't like her. In the 3 years since her financial troubles had started spiraling, Samantha never stayed quiet for long. Within days of every confrontation, she'd call, softening her tone, asking about our health, then circling back to money. But this time, nothing. The silence wasn't passive, it felt calculated, strategic, like the pause before something big. I was halfway through the sports section when I heard the low rumble of a truck. I looked up just as a brown UPS van slowed to a stop in front of our home. Strange. We hadn't ordered anything. Sunday deliveries weren't common unless someone specifically paid extra. The deliverman stepped out with practiced speed, checked his handheld device, then pulled a medium-sized box from the back. It wasn't particularly heavy, about the size of a shoebox, but oddly light. William Carr. That's me. Happy Father's Day, he said cheerfully, handing me the box along with his signature tablet. Someone must think a lot of you. Sunday delivery isn't cheap. I signed, watching as he disappeared down the walkway. I glanced at the shipping label. No sender name. No return address. Just generic fulfillment info. What's that? Jessica called from the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel. No clue, I said, carrying the box inside and placing it on the coffee table, the same one where inheritance papers had been scattered just days earlier. No return label, Jessica noted, her tone shifting to something more cautious. She'd always been more wary of packages than I was. Years of watching news stories about explosives or mail scams had made her rightly skeptical. Maybe it's from the grandkids, she offered, though even she didn't sound convinced. Emma had mentioned Father's Day the last time we saw her, before Samantha started using them as weapons. Before the threat. Before the emotional ransoms. Could be, I murmured, though a heavy unease crept into my gut. Something about this didn't sit right. The timing. The anonymity. The effort to ensure it arrived on a Sunday when we'd be home. Emma certainly didn't pay for expedited shipping. Jessica leaned in to inspect it more closely. Her hands ran along the edge of the label with slow, deliberate care. Then she paused. "William," she said softly, "don't open it." "What? Why not?" "Look," she whispered, pointing at something I hadn't noticed. Tiny punctures along the sides. Minuscule, uniform, intentional. "Air holes," she said. "Something's alive in there." My heart stopped. Now that she mentioned it, I saw them clearly. Dozens of tiny holes, just big enough to let something breathe. "Breathing holes," I echoed. She took a cautious step back from the table. "Whatever it is, it's alive." We stared at the box like it might move. Sunlight filtered through our windows, but the cheerful glow now felt cold, misplaced. Even the stillness of the neighborhood seemed somehow foreboding. "Who would send us something alive?" Jessica whispered. But I already knew. I didn't want to say it. Saying it would make it true. But the timing, the lack of a name, the guarantee that we'd be home when it arrived, it all pointed in one direction. This wasn't a gift. It was a message. A soft rustling sound came from inside. We both froze. It stopped as quickly as it began. Jessica clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Did you hear that?" she asked. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Whatever was inside, it wasn't sleeping anymore. Another sound, barely a whisper, escaped the box. A faint, unmistakable hiss. We didn't move. We barely breathed. Then it came again. Louder this time. More deliberate. Jessica's grip tightened. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "William, call someone. Now." With shaking hands, I reached for my phone. My fingers felt clumsy, disconnected, as I tapped out the emergency number. 911, what's your emergency? There's a package at our house, something alive inside. No return address. It's hissing. Can you describe the sound? I looked to Jessica. She nodded. The noise it sounds like. I hesitated. Saying the word made it feel real. Like a snake. Any visible threats or signs of tampering? No damage, just small holes for breathing. It was delivered this morning. Stay calm. Officers are on their way. Keep your distance. Do not open or touch the package. Are you able to move to a different room? We're about 6 feet away in the living room, I replied. Should we leave the house? Remain indoors but stay back. Officers should arrive in under 10 minutes. Do not approach the box. The dispatcher went silent, save for the sound of typing. 10 minutes. It might as well have been an hour. Jessica looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. Who would do this, William? I didn't want to answer. But we both knew. Even if we didn't say it. Father's Day. No name. No warning. No kindness. Just a trap masked as sentiment. Someone who knew our address. Our routines. Our vulnerability. Someone furious enough to escalate things far beyond angry texts or withheld visits. Another soft movement came from inside the box, something shifting, repositioning. Jessica whispered, 6 days ago, the argument. We both just stood there, frozen, waiting, and realizing this was no longer about money. This was about revenge. She'd stormed out of the house in fury, but she hadn't needed to say Samantha's name. We both knew. The same sickening realization had crept over us, arriving from different directions but landing in the same place. This, my hand gestured toward the box. This wasn't anger. It was something colder, sharper. Revenge. The word remained unspoken, suspended between us like a toxic fog. Too awful to say aloud, too obvious to ignore. Our daughter, the one we'd nurtured, supported, forgiven more times than we could count, had sent us something meant to intimidate or wound. The box rustled again, more aggressively now. Whatever was inside had definitely awakened, confused by its surroundings, perhaps provoked by our movements or voices. What kind of person does this to their own parents? Jessica asked, her voice cracking. Someone desperate, I replied, though I knew it didn't quite capture the truth. It wasn't just desperation. It was something that required forethought, intent. A calculated strike, not an impulsive lashing out. Something had fractured between us and our daughter, something that had festered into malice. Samantha hadn't just acted out, she had orchestrated something cruel. A psychological assault. A pair of car doors slammed outside, jolting us both. I moved to the window and saw a police cruiser idling in our driveway. 2 uniformed officers approached with steady, trained purpose. Relief washed through me so fast I nearly lost my footing. Help had arrived. Whatever lurked inside that deceptively plain package would now be dealt with by someone qualified. The doorbell rang, a crisp, official chime that shattered the stillness. I opened the door before the officer could knock again. He stood tall and alert, built like someone who didn't flinch in chaos. The tag on his uniform read T. Reeve. Mr. Carr? Officer Reeves. We got a call about a suspicious delivery. Yes. Thank you for coming so fast, I said, stepping aside to let him in. It's in the living room. He wiped his boots on the welcome mat before crossing into the house. Jessica emerged from the hallway, still in her apron, hands wringing unconsciously. We're just grateful someone's here, she said. We didn't know what to do. You did the right thing, Officer Reeves assured her with calm authority. Show me the package? We led him to the living room where the box sat on the coffee table, looking somehow smaller now that someone in uniform was present. Reeves approached it with caution, pulling latex gloves from his belt. When did it arrive? About 35 minutes ago, I answered. A Sunday delivery. Someone paid extra for that. He examined the label but didn't touch the box. No return address. And you heard something inside? Hissing, Jessica murmured. She couldn't finish the thought. Like a snake? Reeves asked bluntly. I've dealt with things like this before. Most are harmless, but we take it seriously. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, Unit 47 requesting animal control to 1247, Maple Street. Possible snake in package. A voice crackled back with a 20-minute ETA. Reeves turned toward us again, switching from procedural to probing. Any idea who might have sent this? The question landed with the weight I'd been dreading. I felt Jessica's gaze shift to me. I don't know, I said slowly. Probably just kids pulling some twisted prank. His eyes narrowed slightly. That would require kids who have access to a live reptile, shipping supplies, and your home address. That's not a casual prank. I swallowed hard. He was right. This had taken effort. And motive. Any recent disagreements? Family disagreements, he clarified, watching us. The words dropped like stones between us. Jessica tensed. I could feel her hesitation mirror mine. Nothing serious, I managed to say. Nothing that would justify this. Reeves studied my face, sensing the dodge, but didn't press. Instead, he pulled out a notepad. Any strange purchases? Pet stores? Exotic animal vendors? The question hit like a punch. Pet stores. A memory slammed into me. Last month's credit card statement. Samantha had used my card. Reptile Palace. $127.50. I'd assumed it was something for the grandkids. A toy, a tank, some weird science project. Not this. Not a live snake. Mr. Carr. I'm fine, I lied, blinking hard. Just trying to make sense of it all. But I wasn't fine. Everything was clicking into place. The argument over the inheritance, the spike in demands, the threat of limiting access to the grandkids, and now this box, arriving on Father's Day of all days. She'd waited. Plan. Executed. Do you want to file a report? Reeves asked gently. We can trace the shipment. Open an investigation. Charges can be filed. I looked at Jessica, saw the war in her eyes. I felt it in myself too. Part of me wanted accountability. But a bigger part, the father in me, couldn't stomach the idea of turning my own daughter over to law enforcement. No, I said quietly. Not unless something else happens. Maybe it was a bad joke, that's all. Reeves wrote it down, though his look said he'd seen this before. Families refusing to admit how far things had gone. Another vehicle pulled into our drive. A white van with bold lettering. Animal control. That'll be Mike Johnson, Reeves said. He's the best at what he does. Mike approached with quiet confidence, lugging his gear without hesitation. Within 20 minutes, he had safely removed a 3-foot corn snake from the box. Non-venomous, he confirmed. Very healthy. Somebody paid top dollar for this. Corn snakes are docile, great pets with the right care. He secured the carrier and loaded it into his van. Shame it got used like this. Reeves shook our hands before leaving. Let us know if anything else comes to mind. These things escalate. I nodded and thanked him, though my mind was far away, spinning through possibilities darker than I wanted to admit. The street returned to silence as both vehicles pulled away. Our house felt different now, like something sacred had been disturbed. Jessica retreated to the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with a force that said everything she wasn't ready to voice. I stood by the window, watching the neighbors unload picnic supplies. Laughter spilled out of their car. Normal families. Normal Father's Days. My thoughts returned to that transaction, Reptile Palace. $127.50. Exactly 3 weeks ago, right after the inheritance argument. I pulled out my phone. Samantha's contact stared back at me, her smiling face from Emma's birthday. Before the threat. Before the tension. before the snake. Are you really going to call her? Jessica asked from the kitchen doorway, her voice low and uncertain. I have to know, I replied. If she admits to it. I let the sentence drift, unfinished. The implications were too heavy. What was I prepared to do if my suspicions were confirmed? What recourse does a father have when his daughter crosses a line so deeply personal? I didn't have those answers yet, but I knew the conversation couldn't be avoided. The phone rang twice before Samantha picked up. Dad! Her voice was bright, unnaturally cheerful, the kind of tone she used when she was either hiding something or about to ask for something. Happy Father's Day. How's your morning? I gripped the phone a little tighter. Her question, depending on her guilt or innocence, was either perfectly reasonable or incredibly cruel. It's been an eventful morning, I said evenly. Tell me, Samantha, would you happen to know anything about a peculiar package that arrived today? No, Dad, she answered quickly, too quickly. What happened? And then I heard it. In the background, barely audible, Peter's laugh. Not startled, not confused. It was the smug, restrained chuckle of someone who thought they'd pulled off something clever. That single sound hit me with undeniable certainty. They'd done it. My daughter had sent me that snake. And her husband thought it was funny. Just a delivery mix-up, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Nothing important. I'll let you get back to your day. Are you sure? You sound weird. Weird. I was standing there, fully aware that my daughter had orchestrated a deliberate attempt to rattle me, and she thought I sounded strange? I'm fine, Samantha. Enjoy your Sunday. I hung up before my voice could betray me. My hands were shaking. Jessica stepped beside me, reading my expression like a map. Did she say anything? She didn't have to. Peter laughed. I kept my voice neutral, but inside, the betrayal was curdling into something sharper, colder. Jessica's hand gripped my arm, grounding me. What are you going to do? I glanced at my phone, then toward the office, where all the tools of our family's finances lived. The spreadsheets, the accounts, the years of support I'd extended to our daughter without thank. I'm going to teach her what consequences feel like. By 7 p.m., I was in my office with the door closed and the soft hum of the computer in the background. I'd spent the afternoon walking through the neighborhood, replaying the financial choices that had brought us here. The rage had melted into something calmer, more deliberate. Cold clarity. On the desk were the records of decades of financial rescue missions, printed bank statements showing monthly deposits into Samantha's account, credit card bills I'd paid off without question, insurance payments, car repairs, cash transfers, 3 decades of unconditional bailouts. Beside the keyboard sat the leather folder I'd reviewed too many times, copies of wedding checks, receipts from the car I sold to cover her debts, statements labeled emergency funds that had become expected. Each paper whispered the same truth. My daughter hadn't seen me as a father in years. I was an ATM with a heart. I logged into the bank. Samantha was still an authorized user on the credit card, a convenience I'd set up during her college years and had somehow never revoked. I navigated to the settings. The site asked for security answers. My mother's maiden name, my childhood street. Familiar clicks later, the option appeared. Remove authorized user? My cursor hovered over the button for a long breath. Not out of hesitation, but because I was aware that this was the first truly permanent step I'd taken. 30 years of blind support enough. I clicked. Confirmed. Her access would disappear within the hour. Next came the PIN numbers. She had them memorized, or had watched me long enough to guess. I updated the codes to something personal, something she wouldn't think to guess. The year Jessica and I were married. Then I turned to the automatic payments, the monthly deposits into her checking account. Her car insurance, a gym membership she'd once insisted was critical to her mental health. Each cancellation required confirmation. Each one a symbolic undoing of my own enabling. Through it all, my hands remained steady. This wasn't revenge. This was long overdue accountability. I thought back to the phone call last month, her voice cracking as she swore this was the final emergency. That $5,000 would solve everything. That I was teaching her strength. But what I'd actually taught her was that consequences didn't apply if she cried hard enough. The final page showed a summary of changes. Access removed, recurring payments cancelled, security codes reset. 30 years of emotional debt wiped clean in under 30 minutes. I clicked save. Out the window, the neighborhood moved on in peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons barbecued. A neighbor walked her dog. Normal homes with normal problems. Not reptiles in the mail. The screen confirmed. All updates processed. I leaned back in my chair. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel fear or guilt when I thought of Samantha. I felt in control. Tomorrow, she'd discover it all. Her card wouldn't work. Her payments would fail. And for the first time since her 20s, she'd be responsible for her own messes. The phone stayed quiet. But I knew that wouldn't last. The next morning arrived with rare calm. I sat at the kitchen table with fresh coffee, watching light spill through the windows. No dread, no expectations of urgent phone calls or guilt-laden requests. Jessica moved gently around the kitchen, refilling my cup. She didn't ask what I'd done. But the small nod she gave me told me she knew. The phone rang at 8:15. Samantha. I let it buzz a few extra times before answering. Good morning, Samantha. Dad, what's going on? My card's not working. I tried to check out and it declined. My car insurance bounced. What the hell is happening? I took a slow sip before answering. Samantha, I know what you did. A heavy silence followed. Then, her voice changed, hard, sharp. You're insane. You're seriously going to set me up like this? Set her up? Not what are you talking about? Not what gift? She knew. I didn't set you up, I said calmly. I just stopped funding your chaos. You can't just cut me off without warning. But I could. And I had. I have bills to pay, obligations to meet, responsibilities to uphold. That last word lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Responsibilities. Like showing your parents basic decency. Like learning to manage your own life instead of relying on someone else's wallet. Jessica had paused her morning tasks, silently studying my face, trying to read the emotion behind my calm. But there was no storm this time, just a still, resolute clarity. Dad, please. You don't understand, Samantha insisted, her voice teetering on the edge of desperation. Peter and I are struggling. Rent is due. My car payment, your car payment, the one I've been covering for 2 years, is due. And your apartment rent still comes out of my bank account. I kept my tone even. Then maybe it's time you learned what true financial responsibility actually means. Her voice sharpened. Fine. You want to play hardball? It rose to that shrill register that would have rattled me not long ago. Don't expect to see your grandchildren anymore. Emma and Jake won't even remember you by the time. Samantha, I interrupted, steady and cold. That kind of threat stopped working yesterday. Silence. Only her uneven breathing crackled over the line. I could almost hear her brain scrambling, searching for the emotional trigger that had always worked before. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she said at last, switching effortlessly to her signature victim tone. The one that had drained my bank account more times than I could count. I'm your daughter. I'm struggling. And instead of helping me, you're punishing me for something I didn't even do. Not a denial. Not a question. Just the same vague deflection of someone who knew exactly what she'd done, and hated that I wasn't pretending otherwise. Your struggle is not my responsibility, I told her. You created your own mess. You chose to send that package. And now, you'll choose how this unfolds. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. It was one little prank, and now you're completely losing it? One little prank. There it was. Not quite a confession, but more than enough. Samantha had mailed me a live snake as a joke, and now she expected everything to go back to normal, on my dime. A prank involving a dangerous animal isn't little, Samantha, I said. And a father refusing to bankroll his adult daughter after 3 decades of enabling isn't losing his mind, it's finally using it. Her tone turned glacial. This isn't over, old man. You think you can control me by cutting the money? We'll see about that. Click. The call ended. I gently set the phone down. Jessica, who'd quietly witnessed the exchange, gave me a look of growing respect. Sunlight streamed in through the kitchen window, warming her herb garden. My coffee still tasted perfect. She's coming here, Jessica said softly. I nodded. Probably with Peter. They won't leave it at a phone call. Are you ready? She asked. I gave it real thought. Was I ready to face my entitled daughter and her lazy husband? To listen to them demand what they hadn't earned? To hear my grandchildren's names used as bargaining chips? Yes, I said. I think I am. Moments later, the roar of an engine tore through the calm. Tires screeched into our driveway, followed by the double slam of car doors. We exchanged a look. We both knew. Footsteps stomped toward the house. The doorbell rang once, sharp, impatient. Then again. I rose slowly, steady as stone. Stay here, I told Jessica. No, she replied firmly. We're in this together. The knocking grew louder, more aggressive. I walked to the door and opened it to find them standing there, Samantha and Peter, side by side like a hostile delegation. Samantha's face was flushed with fury, her hair unkempt like she'd stormed out of the house without thinking. Peter towered behind her, his glare dripping with venom. Dad, Samantha snapped. We need to talk. We already did, I said, blocking the doorway. And I thought I made myself clear. Clear, she barked. You were out of your mind. You can't just cut me off over a misunderstanding about some stupid gift. Still, she couldn't bring herself to admit it. Not even now. There's no misunderstanding, I replied. You sent a snake. I responded. Peter stepped forward, puffing himself up. Look, old man. Maybe you didn't think this through. Samantha's got expenses. The kids need. Children whose mother threatens to withhold them for money? I said flatly. That's not a need. That's blackmail. Samantha's face twisted with rage. Fine. You want war? Then know this, you'll never see Emma or Jake again. They'll grow up knowing you chose money over family. Once, those words would have broken me. Now, they bounced harmlessly off the armor I'd built. I looked her in the eye and said quietly, Samantha, that's not a threat. That's a relief. She blinked, stunned. Her mouth parted slightly, like she'd misheard me. Peter's eyes widened. What? If you're the kind of mother who uses her own children as weapons, then maybe it's best they aren't near that kind of manipulation. Not while they're still innocent. Peter stepped closer, rage rolling off him like heat. We know where you live, old man. We know your routine. Maybe think twice before pushing us too far. Jessica tensed behind me, but I didn't flinch. Are you threatening me, Peter? I asked calmly. I'm saying family goes both ways. You cut us off? Don't expect us to just disappear. Actually, I said, that's exactly what I expect. And if you don't, I'll let the police explain it to you. Samantha clutched Peter's arm, maybe realizing he'd gone too far. But instead of cooling him down, she seemed to fuel his fire. You think you're clever, Peter hissed. You think cutting us off gives you power. There are other ways to get what we want. Oh, I'm sure there are, I said. Like getting jobs. You know, earning a living. People have been doing that for centuries. This isn't over, Samantha hissed, her voice now laced with something darker, not panic, but venomous intent. You'll regret treating us like this. Family doesn't abandon family. There will be consequences. There already are consequences, I said quietly. You're living them now. They stared at me in silence, maybe beginning to realize that their arsenal, guilt, fear, entitlement, was no longer effective. The man they had come to rely on as their personal ATM had shut down for good. Without another word, Samantha spun around and stomped back toward their car. Peter trailed behind her, though not before offering me one last threatening glare. I watched their car roar down the driveway, the engine louder than necessary, the tires screeching against the asphalt like a tantrum on wheels. Once their tail lights vanished, I shut the front door and turned to Jessica. Her face was pale, but in her eyes I saw something unexpected: pride. "We're going to need legal counsel," I said. That evening, the serenity of normal life returned to our home. Jessica and I sat at the kitchen table, our quiet rituals bringing a sense of peace after the chaos of the day. She cradled a mug of chamomile tea while I sipped my second coffee. The kitchen had always been our safe space, where big life decisions were made. We'd planned our retirement here, discussed buying the house, and even had tearful talks about Samantha's early struggles with adulthood. Now it was where we confronted a new, painful reality: the fracture of our family. "I keep thinking about when she was 8, Jessica said softly. "Remember that Mother's Day breakfast she made? Burned toast and pulpy orange juice. She was so proud." I did remember. Samantha in her pink pajamas, standing on a stool at the counter, eager to surprise us with breakfast in bed. That moment felt like it belonged to someone else's child now. "She used to draw pictures of us," I added. "Stick figures holding hands. I kept some in my desk for years." "I still have a few in that memory box upstairs," Jessica murmured, her voice heavy with maternal grief. "William, she's still our daughter. Despite everything." I had been waiting for that. Jessica's endless desire to repair, to reconcile. It was part of what I loved about her, her unwavering hope that love could fix what was broken. But not this time. "Jess," I said gently. She crossed a line. "And I have one more step I need to take." Her teacup paused midair. "What kind of step?" I met her eyes, knowing the weight this conversation carried. "Something permanent. Something that makes sure today never repeats." "You're talking about changing the will." It wasn't a question. Jessica knew me well enough to understand. "Yes. Among other things." She fell silent, digesting the finality of it. Adjusting our estate plans would be more than a financial move. It would be an admission that our daughter, the one we raised with love, was no longer someone we could trust. "The grandchildren," she said finally. "Emma and Jake. They shouldn't grow up thinking love can be exchanged for money." I reached across the table and took her hand. What Samantha did today wasn't born of desperation. It was intentional. She sent a live animal to our home. She used our grandchildren as leverage. She manipulated, threatened, and planned it all. That's not a cry for help. That's cruelty. Jessica squeezed my hand, her fingers pressing gently into mine, the way she always had when life became overwhelming. "If we cut her off," I continued, "we protect our peace. We protect our marriage from being overshadowed by her chaos. We safeguard what we've worked for." Jessica held my gaze, sadness and agreement mingling behind her eyes. "Do you think it will stop her?" she asked. "If we do this legally, change the will, take precautions, will she finally leave us alone? It removes her incentive. Without access to money or inheritance, she has nothing to gain by keeping contact. She'll move on, Jess. She always looks for the next source." It sounded cold, but it was the truth. Samantha would find easier prey, people not yet immune to her tactic. "I hate that it's come to this," Jessica whispered. "So do I. But I won't let her destroy what we have left." Through the kitchen window, I watched suburban normalcy unfold. Neighbors walking their dogs, someone tending their garden. Ordinary people living drama-free lives. "When will you do it?" Jessica asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning. I'm calling Margaret Summers first thing. She's handled our legal matters for years. She'll know what to do." Jessica nodded. The pain was still there, but so was resolve. "And when Samantha finds out?" "By then, the protections will be locked in. Her outrage won't be able to reach us." I stood, gathered our empty mugs, and placed them in the sink. Behind me, I heard Jessica's soft sigh, a mixture of grief and relief. She didn't argue. She understood. Tomorrow I'd take the final step. Tonight I'd hold my wife as we mourned the family we thought we had. Margaret Summers' law office was on the third floor of a granite building downtown, its walls lined with imposing legal books and certificates. I sat across from her familiar mahogany desk, a folder of documents in my lap, feeling more at peace than I had in months. "William," she said, removing her glasses, "you mentioned needing full legal protection. Tell me what's happened." Margaret had been with us for 15 years, handling wills, property, and Jessica's mother's estate. To her, we were always the stable, sensible couple. What I was about to tell her would sound like fiction. I laid it all out. The tension over inheritance, the live snake on Father's Day, the credit card shutdowns, the threats made yesterday at our doorstep. Margaret took notes, her face growing increasingly serious. "Peter said they know our routines." "That felt like a threat," I concluded. Margaret set her pen down. "William, this goes far beyond a family argument. This is harassment. Possibly even stalking. We'll tackle it from several angles." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." She pulled out a new legal pad. "Let's begin with the will. You want to restructure the inheritance. I want the money to go toward my grandchildren's education, not their parents' next crisis." "Smart move," she said. "We can set up an educational trust. It'll cover school, college, and legitimate needs. Samantha and Peter will have no access, no control. An independent trustee will release funds only with proof." It was precisely what I needed to hear. "And Jessica? Her portion remains untouched. The house, retirement, her comfort. This change only affects what would have gone to Samantha." Next came the matter of the restraining order. Margaret opened a new folder and began cataloging the events. The snake, the threats, Peter's intimidation, the escalation. "Using a live animal is serious," she said, her pen racing. "It's premeditated and dangerous. Courts won't take that lightly. How long does this take?" "We can finalize the will changes within a week. The restraining order can be filed today. Once it's in place, any contact from them becomes a police matter." I felt a surge of relief. After years of silent tolerance and emotional compromise, something real was shifting. A wall was going up. A wall they couldn't tear down with guilt, shame, or threats. Finally, we would be safe. A pressure I hadn't even realized I was holding seemed to dissolve from my chest. For the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe without bracing myself. The burden of always being on call for Samantha's latest disaster, of carefully monitoring my words to avoid setting off another threat, a fueling behavior that only got worse with time, was finally coming to an end. Margaret had one final piece of advice. "Given everything you've shared," she said calmly, "I strongly suggest documenting everything moving forward. Any contact attempts, any boundary violations, especially if she tries to involve the grandchildren. Keep a record. This may escalate before it settles down. People who rely on manipulation don't take rejection well." I nodded. I knew she was right. Samantha's reaction, once she found out she'd been disinherited and legally barred from contacting us, might be explosive. But that no longer filled me with dread. I was no longer alone. Legal safeguards were now in place. Her fury would be handled by professionals trained for such situations, not two aging parents trying to protect what peace they had left. Margaret's assistant entered the room with a neat stack of documents. As I signed each one, a sense of closure settled in my bones. This was no longer a conversation, it was an action, finalized. 30 years of draining financial dependence had reached its legal conclusion. Our home would finally be shielded. The restraining order was expected to be processed by close of business that day. By tomorrow morning, Samantha and her husband Peter would be formally served. From that point on, any contact would be a matter for law enforcement. As I rose to leave, I extended my hand to Margaret, the woman who had just helped me reclaim the right to live in peace. Outside her office, the world moved on, traffic, pedestrians, everyday life. "William," she called as I reached the door. You've done the right thing. Your safety, and your family's safety, matters. I gave her a nod, clutching the folder against my chest. Tomorrow, Samantha would realize her power plays had finally met their match. That night, Jessica and I slept more soundly than we had in years. The house was still. There were no phone calls, no sudden visits, no drama, just quiet. The following 2 days passed with a kind of serenity that almost felt unfamiliar. Coffee in the mornings without anxiety, walks around the block without peering at our phones, dinners without discussing what Samantha needed this time. The peace felt surreal. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called. I could hear satisfaction in her voice. William, the documents were delivered at 2:15. They've both been served, the restraining order and the will amendments. Everything's official. I thanked her and ended the call, then sat in silence for several minutes. Through the front window, I watched Mrs. Patterson planting bright tulip. Kids next door were riding bikes in zigzags down the sidewalk. It was an ordinary afternoon. That, in itself, was extraordinary. Jessica appeared in the doorway. Did they get the papers? This afternoon, I replied. It's all finalized. She came to sit beside me, taking my hand. We didn't need to rehash what Samantha might do or speculate about her next move. We knew. The law was explicit. The protections were airtight. And for the first time in decades, we were finally insulated from her manipulation. I thought of the child I once knew, Samantha as a girl, scribbling family drawings, making us burnt toast for breakfast in bed. That little girl was gone. In her place was a grown woman who'd once mailed me a live snake and threatened to cut us off from our grandchildren if we didn't meet her demands. That change hadn't happened overnight. It crept in slowly. Over the years, I justified one behavior after another, excusing her actions, hoping each outburst was just temporary. But the woman who came to our door, demanding money and issuing ultimatums, wasn't someone I needed to excuse any longer. Love hadn't been enough to set boundaries, but the law had. What Samantha and Peter wanted most, control, influence, access, was now legally out of reach. The irony was bitter. Samantha had long dangled Emma and Jake like bait, threatening to sever contact if we didn't comply. Now, by her own escalation, she'd ensured permanent distance. The children, of course, would still be looked after. Their educational trust remained untouched, managed by independent fiduciaries who could not be threatened or emotionally manipulated. Their tuition, school supplies, tutors, all accounted for, without giving their parents a single cent. Jessica gave my hand a soft squeeze. Do you think she understands what she's lost? She will, I said. There's nothing left for her to take. No inheritance. No legal leverage. She'll have to find someone else to manipulate now. And if she tries anything, the police, not us, will be the ones answering. I'd been Samantha's net for 30 years, catching her every time she fell, bailing her out and hoping she'd eventually find her footing. I sold off my vintage convertible to pay off her gambling debt. Paid her rent more than once. Wrote checks, always with the naive hope that it would be the last one. That something would finally click. But that snake in the box, that was her farewell. It said more than any letter ever could. It was her way of trying to frighten me back into submission. Instead, it pushed me straight into Margaret's office. It got me to do what I should have done a decade ago. That evening, Jessica and I made dinner side by side. There were no interruptions, no emergencies, no threats hanging like storm clouds over the table. It was quiet, peaceful, like stepping outside after the final gusts of a long, punishing storm. Tomorrow we would wake up in a home fortified by law. Our savings would grow untouched, secured for our own future, not drained for someone else's next crisis. Our relationship, once frayed by constant stress, would continue in peace. I hadn't stopped loving my daughter. But love didn't mean allowing her to wreck lives, including her own. What I'd done was the most loving thing I could do: draw a hard line. Legal accountability had taken the place of guilt. Structure had replaced chaos. And with that came freedom. Tonight, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I'd fall asleep without wondering what tomorrow's cost might be. If this story spoke to you, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. To hear what happens next, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching,